Welcome to this channel on magnetic energy, technology, principles, applications. This video is on magnetic energy and electricity. And so I have a couple qualifiers. This is going to be an oversimplification on this topic, as most of these videos are. And I have this very crude prop to help me try to explain some concepts from a magnetic energy point of view. Just in case you haven't seen the other videos, I just want to say very quickly that magnetic energy, the model that I represent on these videos is basically an etheric model of the universe. When it comes to the actual technology, what we're working with for the most part on these particular magnetic energy units is a flow of ions through the conductive use of neutrons. So this is it's like a low level nuclear reaction that is essentially a room temperature, low level nuclear reaction. And I'll get more into that, and I get obviously more into detail on other videos. But so just for the sake of this video, I'm focusing on electricity that is produced, if you will, at a conventional power plant, such as, like a hydroelectric dam or a coal-fired or nuclear power plant. And so this particular crude little model right here, this thing that I just threw together, is to help represent what would be like one of the molecular structures of the copper, part of a molecular structure of copper in a wire. So the common thing is we've got this big giant glorified tea kettle that's forcing magnetic fields, forcing copper coils through magnetic fields. And so that's the process that I want to talk about. And so one little part of that copper molecular structure, this is kind of like a representation. And you'll notice that this is like a double connected vortex, basically interconnected vortex that goes in this way and then it comes out as it continues out the other way. So this would be like one part of that vortex, or what we would call part of that molecular structure. The manifestation of this would be like a negative. So this would be like in the magnetic model, kind of like the representation, if you will, of like an electron field. And then this would be more like the representation of a proton field, like the positive. This is a manifestation of a positive energy. So in the etheric model, in the magnetic energy model that is / etheric model, we have a vortex of energy. So imagine this represents a very complex vortex of energy. So this could have an untold number of magnetic resonance signatures embedded in this vortex. And as we have a vortex of energy, that attracts an etheric energy. So the etheric energy around the universe is essentially neutral in nature. And so as these molecular structures, as these energy systems, they're spinning fields, the etheric energy is going to be entering in this vortex like out here and then converting to the polarities essentially in this type of molecular structure, this energy field. And then you have your neutral point at center, and then you have your return back to the etheric flow here. So in an ideal system, this flows energy, and it flows it quite nicely. In a magnetic energy unit, what we would be doing is we would be very sensitively respecting the magnetic resonances involved in this, but we would very, very respectfully, if you will, be alternating the polarities, what we call the north and south polarities. But in the magnetic model, those are really a magnet is, in this model, it's considered a concentrated, organized, etheric flow of energy. So what we're doing is we're alternating the inflow and outflow of those magnets and exposing the copper to that energy, but not too strong of a magnetic field and not too weak, kind of in the middle, in that just right point, in the Goldilocks point. And as that energy saturates, if you will, or charges these these molecular structures, say of copper, for example, we will hit a point of resonance, and we're creating, essentially, we're balancing the inflow and outflow of that energy and creating what we would call a neutral type of resonance in this. And so when we hit the copper resonance of something in a magnetic energy unit, what we're doing is we're capitalizing on this entire form. Okay, so we're getting the whole thing to resonate, and we are getting it to resonate because this is an etheric, this has a template. This is a templated molecular structure. So this particular copper, for example, is a templated molecular structure. So if you resonate those molecular structures at the right vibratory frequency, the frequency or the vibration or the pulse rate, magnetic pulse rate, they become accessible in an unlimited amount of energy. They access an unlimited amount of etheric energy because there's an inflow and an outflow, and that stays intact. And so that gives us tremendous flexibility to use different elements like diamagnetic or paramagnetic elements and capitalize on the etheric flow of those elements. And it allows us to use, like for example, copper coils to send out signals into the ether that are neutrally based, that allows to attract an infinite amount of energy. So that's like what we're looking at in a magnetic unit. But when you contrast that to what's happening in a conventional power plant, let's take a look at that, for example. So you have very strong magnetic fields that are being forced through copper coils. And so what happens in the copper coil is you get something like this. So you have electrons, what we call from a conventional point of view, we have electrons that are essentially being stripped of off the molecular structure. From the magnetic model point of view, what we're looking at is we are stripping off a vortex field of energy from that molecular structure. We're stripping that off, and what we're creating is essentially through the conductor, depending on the strength of the magnetic field, it'll be like a magnetic / etheric pressure wave through the conductor, and that the distance of that will depend on a number of factors, on the size of the conductor, like the thickness of the wire, for example, the strength of the magnetic field that's forcing that pressure flow. So what happens is you get a whole bunch of these in that conductor. And so this is essentially the first part of like a conventional electrical circuit. So you may have, now you can translate what I'm saying into conventional magnetic terms such as voltage and amps and current and different things like that. But I'll just give from the magnetic model what the phenomenon is that's happening. So as soon as you force this to happen with an unbalanced magnetic field. So by unbalanced, I mean that we're either pushing like a north or a south field on it. So we're not necessarily looking for a neutral balance in a conventional generator, like in a power station generator. We're just looking for maximum magnetic field to just be pushed through those copper coils. And so that type of unbalance and that force, we're forcing these basically to break away from those molecular structures. So now what we have is a conductor that's full of unbalanced vortices of energy that are looking to complete their circuit, and they're doing it under pressure. And so the etheric flow, everything wants to return to the etheric flow. Everything is an open system, including the conductors, those wires, those are open systems. Just that's part of this whole etheric model, is everything's an open system. So now this energy is looking for its counterpart. It's looking for a positive energy to connect to. It's looking for ground. It's looking to essentially like transmute or convert or change into, not really, because it doesn't really change, but it essentially either combusts either through heat or some form to where it essentially gets back into the etheric flow. And so that's very important. So it's looking for that, and there's a lot of pressure. So there could be heat on that wire. If it gets too much, it could literally melt the wire. There could be a lot of sparking, a lot of reactivity in the wire, like there is in essentially all electrical generation. So this is a very unbalanced thing, and partly what happens at that point is the energy outside, the energy field outside of the wire, outside of the conductor, becomes equally important to what's happening inside of the wire. Okay, so there's a field that's generated. So you have these, like these would be loose now, essentially, and they're looking for a home. They're looking to complete a circuit. They're looking for the other side of the loop of the circuit, or from a magnetic energy model, they're looking to return to the etheric flow, and they're going to do essentially whatever it takes to do that. But at the same time, as soon as you break this away from a complete molecular structure, what happens is, from a magnetic energy model point of view, that molecular structure is templated. Okay, this is not templated. Half of this one vortex, this is not higher dimensionally templated. That's one of the reasons why this creates such a problem in our environment. This is not dimensionally templated. This is looking simply to return to the etheric flow, and there's a lot of pressure and force behind that energy to do that. This, on the other hand, this is a templated design. This is a templated molecular structure. So as soon as you strip something away from this, the higher dimensional template is going to instantly fill these shoes no matter what it takes. It's going to try to fill these shoes. It's going to try to complete, it's going to try to basically bring this back into that molecular structure. And it'll do that if it can't grab it from the etheric field, which it can't, because the etheric field is not full of loose electrons that are just waiting. That are just waiting to be etherically drawn. It's not, no, the etheric field is a neutral, it's a relatively neutral field. It's not full of a bunch of negative electrons or even positive electrons. It's full of neutral energy. This is not sitting around in the etheric field. This isn't free energy, okay? This doesn't come in. When you break this apart and you have this, there are consequences. And that's that's one of the best metaphysical meanings of this particular video is when you force something to happen, there are always consequences. There are consequences to the surrounding environment. So what this molecular structure does when it's minus this is it immediately starts attracting from the environment whatever it can, whatever is available around it. It's going to attract this out of the environment. It's going to attract it. It's going to break it away from other molecular structures. It's going to pull it from ground. It's going to do whatever it can to fill this void, because the template is complete. But as soon as that strong magnetic field strips that off, now instantaneously at the speed of magnetic energy, beyond the speed of light, an instantaneous reaction is for this molecular structure to regain this and become complete again. And so it will do that no matter what it takes. And so you have this field outside of the conductor that is a point of exchange, but it's not an etheric point of exchange from the greater system. It's a point of exchange from our environment, from whatever can be gathered from our environment to instantly replace this at an etheric level and then as a manifestation level inside of a conducting wire. So that could be ionospheric exchange, that could be ozone layer exchange, that could be ground exchange, it could be wherever it can get the easiest electron that can fill that void. But what we call an electron, it's really a vortex of energy that is being templated, and there's a hard draw for that. And when a particular conductor, like a copper conductor, and these molecular structures are being heavily bombarded with magnetic fields that have an inflow or an outflow of etheric energy, they're supercharged. So they have the ability to pull from molecular structures that are less supercharged. They are a dominant force now in the environment, and they will strip the environment, they will strip the ozone layer, they will strip whatever they can to keep this thing complete. And that's partly why electrical generation, like through a hydroelectric jam or a nuclear power plant or a coal-fired power plant, why it is incredibly damaging to our energy system around our planet, to the magnetic fields, to the continuous flow of energy that happens, the exchange with our ozone layer / ionosphere / magnetosphere. All of that is impacted by high power electrical generation. And now let's just get back to one thing real quick. So this is kind of like the foundation of our power system. We get this little guy, and then this wants to complete a circuit and essentially get back into the system, back into the flow. And we run our entire society off of these little guys, what we call electrons. And this is an incomplete, unbalanced form of energy. So you can resonate this at different frequencies, and you can do all kinds of fun, creative things. I mean, look, our whole world is built around this. But when you work with something like from a magnetic energy unit, and you have a complete system that is flowing with etheric flow in and out, the versatility is infinitely greater than this. Why is that? Because as you take like ions, or you take complete molecular structures that have inflow and outflow to them, we can change their pulse rate, we can have them interact with different elements, and we can do all kinds of fun and crazy things like replicate matter, disassemble matter with them safely, low-level nuclear reactions like low-temperature nuclear reactions, anti-gravitic technology, creating light, creating heat, spontaneously regenerating the human body and other physiological systems. So producing matter at will. There's a big difference, because now we're working with a templated molecular structure that has an etheric flow in it, and as we change the pulse rate to it and change the the magnetic pulse rate to it, all kinds of very, very cool things can happen. And this taps an etheric energy that is unlimited. It doesn't need to damage our environment to work. It doesn't need to pull from the ionosphere in a negative way or the ozone layer and strip them. It flows with the system. This is how the system is meant to work, as a correct inflow and outflow of energy. And if you'll notice, this is kind of like the foundation of a toroidal energy, a toroidal field. And that is kind of like the foundation of energy exchange in our universe, to have that massive energy. And when the units, the magnetic units, all start using this complete energy, the circuit is ether to ether. Okay, so there isn't heat. People will call this cold electricity, or we'll call it the flow of ions, or we'll call it the magnetic current. There's different names, but they're all kind of doing the same thing. They're using complete molecular structures that don't require heat, that don't require voltage, that don't require this whole electrical system we've created. They don't require those type of phenomenon in order to exist and in order to be effective and productive. And so you think about the difference is dramatic. And the difference is, I mean, this is like alien technology. This is bringing the future of humanity into a sustainable model that can then travel to the stars. We want to get rid of this model, okay? Technology that creates this is shortchanging us. Electrons shortchange are what we can really do technologically. We want to get rid of that model completely and go to a full, complete model that has to do with more like magnetic current, that is a million times more versatile, takes us beyond the speed of light, takes us into a renewable energy generation, and in a sustainable model that can essentially last forever and bring us to the stars and take away all the pollution on the planet and much, much more. Okay? So I hope that made a little bit of sense. I know I touched on a lot of things in this video, and I hope it wasn't too bizarre, but I just wanted to kind of touch on what happens in electrical generation and from a magnetic energy point of view. And so I will see you next time.